Hey, our two beautiful bunnies. Okay, so you want to dedicate today's invocation to peace and compassion and
Tolerance.
took the word right out of my
Yeah, together.
mouth. I found out about what occurred and transpired in Atlanta, the unfortunate events there, and then I shared it with Prasad. We're in a bubble, so unless we see it on in social media, we don't really know what is happening from day to day. And for me, it brought up a lot of sadness, just very deep sadness for throughout the ages, marginalized communities, tribes of people who have been oppressed, persecuted, all of the atrocities that some humans have perpetuated on others. And for others, it might bring up anger. I think with the Black Lives Matter earlier, well, that was last year, that brought up a lot of anger. And for me, anger and sadness are very closely related.
So we're both feeling the heaviness, and even between us, a little bit of, I would say violence is too strong of a word, maybe between us. However, as as we were percolating on what to invoke today and what to discuss, given the last 48 hours, 72 hours, like Runadera said, we're in a bit of a bubble, but men's group yesterday, we were talking about it a little bit. To be antidote focused, right? So as we were talking about today, and what came up, tolerance, bringing in tolerance.
And one useful tool that we have in our toolbox is nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, who created nonviolent communication, talks a lot about what is life affirming, and he does use the term, violence to to categorize some of the language that we use, even in everyday life, and how there are better, more compassionate and loving ways and peaceful ways to communicate with each other, even with ourselves too.
Especially with ourselves.
Especially with ourselves, which is where it starts. So a little bit of my thoughts around this is we talk a lot about conditioning in our events and our coaching, and this it's not even just cultural conditioning, but it's kind of everywhere you look to be afraid of whatever other is for you in particular. And then that fear can easily become aggression and become some of the hate crimes we've unfortunately seen for decades and centuries, not just in America, all throughout the world.
Especially when we're talking about race and race relations, even on the subtle levels of exclusivity versus inclusivity, and then how quickly that can devolve into intolerance, and then intolerance with some mental instability, we can get like physical violence. So Karunadera reminded me not to go down the rabbit hole of negativity and not to be overly positive, but to be solution focused or oriented, especially in our invoking, to be invoking the inclusivity. Yes, like Runadera was saying, with ourselves, obviously with each other, and in general. How do we have subtle little strains of judgmentalness, noticing someone else, and intolerance, Things that annoy us can come to intolerance, and those around us. So who are we keeping company with?
Mhm.
But I'm getting off a little bit, just to invoke that Marshall Rosenbergian nonviolence. What did Martin Luther King Jr. teach us about tolerance? What did Gandhi teach us about loving and inclusivity? These are the foundations for nonviolence. And this, we believe, is a start towards an antidote towards these way too common events that are happening a lot in America and worldwide, but our heart breaks for America and the families and the conditions that support this.
So I think this is a good time to take a pause. And I know I have tears coming up. And just be with your own self. And it's also okay if you're neutral. You know, it's also okay if you hear some of this, or you're aware of the news, this or otherwise, and it doesn't really bring anything up in you. That's okay too. But we want to give it the space and the time that it deserves to be with it. What I see happen in some circles, like some social circles, is that we start to re-traumatize each other by saying what happened, like whatever we're hearing in the news, we repeat that story. And because feelings can be really uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially in more social circles, not spiritual circles like ours, but in other circles, that's an excuse. Like, okay, well, I'm talking about what happened, but I'm not feeling into how that affects me personally. I think that that's what's going to create change. If I could connect, so we'll invite you in a moment, just a few moments of silence, not just to honor the death and the transition and the entire event and all of the events throughout history, but also to just be with yourself and be very honest about how you connect to this event and any others, how maybe you've witnessed or you've experienced something similar. Maybe it wasn't about race, but it could be about anything else. Again, other could be anything. It could be abilities, it could be who your partner is, it could be all kinds of things. Do you want to say anything else before we?
Yeah, just one last thing. Well, as a transition.
Yeah.
The words that came as you were so eloquently describing that is to take a moment now in this invocation to invoke tolerance of our feelings.
Mm.
Thank you, Yogi Ban. Sadness, anger, outrage. I'm full of heartbreak. These started raining here, feeling the tears. Invoking tolerance of our emotions. And as we bring in that tolerance, maybe, just maybe, little bits of peace can emanate in us and around us. And that may be just one direction in an antidote in the ways we need to be going.
And I want to say personally to I think I speak for both of us to, in particular, to our Asian American, Pacific Islander, people of mixed descent, anyone who is more directly impacted by what's been going on. And not just yesterday, we understand that there are other events that haven't been under the media's eye that have occurred, especially since COVID. We understand that Asian women in particular are being targeted. So I just want to extend my heart across space and time, and my love for your own tears and your own grieving and your own exploration of what that means for you, what it means to be Asian today, and continuing to stand in support, hand in hand, heart to heart with all of you. Thank you for being here with us today.
Much love. Much love.